Well, the Surrey Board of Education is reporting an improvement in its finances over the last school year. In 2024-2025, the district ended up with a surplus of $33 million. That's according to new figures. Now, this after the school board said it had to make deep cuts to balance the budget for the school year. And so how are parents receiving news of this improved financial situation? Well, to talk about that, we're joined by the president of the Surrey District Parent Advisory Council, Anne Whitmore, joins us this morning. Good morning to you, Anne.
Hello.
Thank you for taking the time with us. Your initial reaction when you heard that news, a surplus of $33 million over the 24-25 year.
School funding is a mystery to many people. It's so complex. And so going from, a budget that's balanced to a budget that was going to be $900,000 short to now a surplus and then heading into a $16 million shortfall, it's very, very confusing for many people, including myself.
And so how did we get here? Do you know? Have you been able to figure it out?
No. And also what I do suspect is that it came at great cost to our students and to the staff that support them. You've covered, I've been here before talking about this. We had the closure of 3 of our learning centers that support our most vulnerable learners, Strong Start, which support 0 to 5-year-olds who are just entering education and learning and community, and supports for disabled students like educational assistance.
And not to mention school buses and band as well.
Absolutely.
I mean, and the loss of the band programs were very significant for a lot of parents and students.
Huge. Thank you for bringing that up.
And so what happens to those? I mean, that was a way to expect that was a way to cover what was expected to be a $16 million deficit in this school year. Is that right?
Correct. So a lot of those changes happened last year and they impact this year's budget. So there seems to be, compartmentalization of what happens year to year. Overall, school boards are obligated to present balanced budgets to the Ministry of Education. Otherwise, they can get fired. We've seen other school boards that has happened to. So that always raises, a bit of a conflict with a school board where they say that they're providing a quality education but on the ground, families are seeing less and less supports for their kids.
Okay, so the cuts that we were talking about will go ahead regardless of the surplus then?
That's what we're told. Yeah.
Okay. Well, with that $33 million available, the chair of the Surrey Board of Education, Gary Timischuk, outlined how he says the school district intends to spend that surplus.
We are going to be spending some of that money on upgrades to our systems. We've got some systems in the district that are long overdue for some upgrades, and so we're going to make sure that gets done over the next little while. And we're also keeping aside about $12 million that's unrestricted. So in other words, we're not earmarking it for anything. And that's like a rainy day fund.
So upgrades to some systems, management systems, I take it, and a rainy day fund, is that where you would like to see this $33 million going?
Absolutely not. I understand that, first of all, headcount doesn't happen until the end of September, and then there's a form that goes into the ministry, and finances again are going to be adjusted then and then again in the spring. But overall, what we really want to see is that the board actually centers the needs of children. Systems, and I don't know what it takes to run a billion-dollar organization, but I do know what it takes to support kids in a lot of ways. And what we're seeing is that the supports for kids in the classroom, both in terms of the size of classes, the complexity in classrooms, the lessening and the removal of educational support, other para-services like speech language pathology and assessments for kids where they need them now. Kids don't get a do-over on that. And so you'll hear the board talking about being fiscally responsible, but what we really want them to do is to be morally responsible. What is their moral responsibility now for the kids that are in the classrooms right now?
Gary Timischuk, though, says there still is not a lot of excess money at hand. So he says if you use the money to hire music teachers or support staff, the district could run the risk of laying them off again in a few months. I mean, what do you say to that when it comes to bringing back a program that would require bringing back staff?
Sure. And also, where have the cuts been in terms of programming or supports that don't actually directly impact students? So There may have been, we have just not been made aware of them. I understand that our district administration runs really lean, but the perception from the outside is that there's a very well-equipped building. I understand their ERP program is aging, but it's getting by. So is that the priority? For example, my kid went to high school and could not log into the MyEd portal, which is a whole other subject of the trash program that is, but she could not physically log into it on the computer at her school because it didn't work. So what is the experience of students in a classroom versus what is the administrative experience?
You talked about the difference between, the number of students who were expected and then the number of students who show up. You've got the head count in September. Does the funding model for students, or for schools rather, need to change, to not away from that per student funding that we're talking about?
I don't, again, pretend to understand how exactly it should be. There are other provinces that have a rolling model, and so therefore the ease happens when there's a fluctuation in enrollment. When you heard from our district that they were almost $1 million short come the end of the year,
Yeah.
it's because the budget then got adjusted retroactively based on what they had expected from their September numbers last year. So, I mean, the bottom line is you have a massive organization that's commoditizing kids. And so per student, you receive about $9,015, regardless of what the Minister of Education says, around where it's around $14,000. And then plus. So depending on whether you have a student with disabilities, or they're learning English, or they have, or they're Indigenous, or have other categories that they fall into, then they tag on extra money. But most of it goes into one lump pot that then the district distributes.
So, Anne, what does your group do now?
We continue to advocate for more funding for districts in order to provide services. We also are calling out the need for a minimum positive standard of care. In 2019, the ombudsperson did a review of students with disabilities, and they said that we need to have a minimum positive. So parents like me go into the school and say, please support my kid. This is what they need. And we don't have enough money. But there's a moral obligation to support students, and they have been continuously having their rights violated and underserved by removing supports. And so we need to fund the most vulnerable students. And when we create that level playing field where everyone can access their education, everybody in the system wins.
And good to talk with you. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you so much for talking about our kids.
Take care. That's Anne Whitmore, the president of the Surrey District Parent Advisory Council.